Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The thing about working maintenance on an interstellar diplomatic vessel is that nobody really notices you until something breaks. And Fiona liked it that way, honestly. No speeches, no formal dinners, no having to pretend she understood the difference between a Rigelian greeting bow and a Rigelian insult bow, which, for the record, was about 3 degrees and could start a war if you got it wrong. She was elbow-deep in a junction panel on Deck 9, humming something off-key and probably older than half the crew, when the smell hit her. Musk. Sharp. Wild. With an undercurrent of something that made the lizard part of her brain sit up and whisper, "Hey, maybe we should not be here." Fiona paused, sonic wrench halfway to a stubborn relay coupling. The corridor behind her had gone very, very quiet. She turned slowly, because sudden movements around apex predators, yeah, she'd sat through that safety briefing, the one everyone slept through except the people who actually read their job contracts. 3 pairs of eyes stared back at her. Gleaming. Golden. Unblinking. Felkari cubs. Oh, fantastic. They were smaller than the adults she'd seen stalking around the diplomatic quarters, all coiled muscle and casual menace. But smaller was relative. Each one was still the size of a large dog, covered in midnight blue fur with those distinctive silver stripes that rippled when they moved. And they were moving. Closer. Low to the ground, heads tilted in that universal predator assessment of food, threat, or toy. "Ah," Fiona said, which was perhaps not her most eloquent moment. "Hi." The closest one, the biggest of the 3, with a white patch over one eye, chirped. Actually chirped, like some kind of murderous bird. Its ears swiveled forward. Fiona's training, such as it was, consisted of don't run, don't scream, don't make eye contact, and definitely don't. "You guys lost?" she asked, making direct eye contact, because apparently her survival instincts had clocked out early today. The cubs exchanged glances. The big one chirped again and took another step forward. The second one, sleeker and more cautious, hung back, watching. The third, noticeably smaller than its siblings, was already trying to climb into her open toolbox. "Hey! Hey! No!" Fiona lunged forward, forgetting entirely that she was lunging toward alien predators, and shooed the little one away from her plasma torch. "That's not a toy. That'll take your paw clean off." The small cub made a sound like a squeaky hinge and bounced backward, landing on its haunches with an expression that, on a human child, would have been pure mischief. Fiona blinked, then blinked again. They were just sitting there, watching her, the way kids watched adults do interesting things. "Okay," she said slowly, sitting back on her heels. "Okay, so, where's your, handler? Guardian? Pack leader?" She was pretty sure she'd seen the Felkari delegation on Deck 5 with some youngsters earlier in the week, which meant someone, somewhere, was missing 3 very expensive, very toothy political assets. The big one with the eye patch tilted its head the other way. Its tail, thick and tufted at the end, swished once. Fiona glanced down the corridor. Empty. She glanced at her comm unit. She should call someone. Security. Command. Literally anyone whose job description included dealing with unsupervised alien children who could probably bite through a bulkhead. The small one made that squeaky sound again and crept closer, sniffing at her boots. "You're trouble, aren't you?" Fiona muttered. "I can tell." It sneezed in response, a tiny explosion of air that ruffled its whiskers, and Fiona felt something in her chest do a stupid, inconvenient thing. The softening thing. The, oh no, they're actually kind of cute thing that bypassed every logical thought about claws and teeth and interstellar incident reports. She sighed, pulled her lunchbox out of her toolkit. "You guys hungry? Is that it?" 3 pairs of ears perked up simultaneously. "Yeah, that's what I thought." She unwrapped a protein bar, allegedly chocolate flavor, actually tasted like someone's idea of chocolate filtered through a recycling unit, and broke off a piece. "Here, don't tell anyone I did this. Pretty sure feeding the delegates is against some kind of protocol." She tossed the piece to the big one, who snatched it out of the air with reflexes that would make a mongoose jealous. Chewed once, swallowed, stared at her with what might have been respect. "Good, right? Yeah, it's terrible, but it's calories." She broke off 2 more pieces for the others. The cautious one approached delicately, taking the food with what looked like actual manners. The small one just pounced on it like it was trying to kill it first. Fiona found herself smiling. Then she caught herself smiling and frowned instead, because this was absurd. She was sitting in a maintenance corridor having a snack party with 3 alien predator cubs who definitely should not be here. "All right, look," she said, standing up and brushing crumbs off her work pants. "This was fun and all, but I've got 6 more panels to check before my shift ends, and you 3 need to get back to wherever you're supposed to be before someone notices you're gone, and I end up in front of a disciplinary committee." She packed up her tools, sealed the junction panel, and started walking. Made it about 10 steps before she realized she could hear the soft pat, pat, pat of paws on deck plating behind her. Fiona stopped, turned around. No. 3 cubs sat in a neat row, looking up at her. "No," she repeated, pointing back down the corridor. "Go, home, shoo." The big one yawned, showing off a truly impressive set of teeth. "I'm serious. I don't know what you think this is, but I'm not your friend or your person or whatever. Go find your actual people." The small one squeaked and started grooming its paw. Fiona stared at them. They stared back, completely unbothered. The universe's most patient game of chicken, except she was playing against creatures that literally hunted for fun. "Fine," she said eventually, throwing up her hands. "Fine. But when someone finds you following me around and asks questions, I'm telling them you stalked me. This is stalking. Interstellar stalking." She turned and kept walking. The padding of paws resumed behind her. By the time she reached the next maintenance junction, she'd accepted her fate. By the time she finished that panel, she'd named them in her head. The big one was clearly Reek, because he had that bold, "I'm in charge here" energy. The cautious one was Loam, all careful consideration and analysis. And the tiny chaos agent was definitely Pip, because if that wasn't a Pip, she'd eat her sonic wrench. She told herself she'd take them back to the Felkari quarters after her shift. Definitely after her shift. It wasn't her problem that they'd decided she was interesting. Someone else could deal with the diplomatic implications. Except when her shift ended and she trudged back to her quarters on Deck 12, all 3 cubs followed her right to her door. And when she went inside, alone, thank you, there were limits, they curled up in the corridor outside and apparently decided that was home now. Fiona leaned against her door, listening to the sound of purring through the metal. Deep, thrumming, contentment sounds that vibrated through the deck plating. "This is insane," she told her empty quarters. "This is absolutely insane." The purring continued. She should call someone. Right now. This instant. Instead, she took a shower, ate a rehydrated meal that claimed to be lasagna, and went to bed, trying very hard not to think about the 3 predators sleeping outside her door, like the universe's most dangerous security detail. She'd deal with it in the morning. Definitely in the morning. Morning came with a chime at her door, and the kind of pounding that suggested someone very important was very unhappy. Fiona groaned, pulled on her uniform, and keyed the door open. Gemma stood in the corridor, the first officer's expression hovering somewhere between bewildered and exasperated. At her feet, 3 Felkari cubs sat in perfect formation, tails curled neatly around their paws, looking for all the world like they'd been there on official business. "Fiona," Gemma said slowly, "would you like to explain why there are 3 juvenile Felkari camped outside your quarters?" Fiona looked at the cubs. The cubs looked at her. Pip yawned. "Would you believe me if I said they followed me home?" Gemma's eye twitched. "The captain wants to see you. Now. And bring them with you, apparently. Because they won't move." "Yeah," Fiona said, grabbing her toolkit out of habit. "Yeah, that tracks." This was going to be a long day. The captain's ready room was designed to be impressive. Sweeping viewports showing the star-streaked darkness of transit space, holographic displays floating like captured constellations, furniture that probably cost more than Fiona made in a year. Very official. Very intimidating. Less intimidating when 3 alien cubs were sprawled across the expensive carpet like house cats, one of them actively chewing on what looked like a decorative pillow. "Pip, drop it!" Fiona hissed. Pip looked at her, looked at the pillow, and took another deliberate bite. Fiona heard something tear. Captain Dmitri sat behind his desk, hands folded, face carefully neutral in that way that meant he was screaming internally. Next to him, Gemma stood with a data pad, her expression suggesting she'd already drafted 6 incident reports and was working on number 8. "So," Dmitri said eventually, "this is irregular." "Yes, sir," Fiona agreed, because what else was she going to say? "The Felkari delegation is in a state of—" He paused, glancing at Gemma. "Panic, sir. The word you're looking for is panic." "Concern," Dmitri corrected smoothly. "Diplomatic concern. Apparently, these 3 juveniles are the offspring of some very important people, and their disappearance last night caused something of an incident." Fiona winced. "I tried to take them back. They wouldn't go." "Yes, we're aware. We're also aware that when the Felkari handlers attempted to retrieve them this morning, all 3 cubs, and I'm reading directly from the report here, displayed aggressive defensive posturing and refused to abandon their chosen position outside Technician Fiona's quarters." Rick, as if understanding he was being discussed, lifted his head and chirped proudly. "They're children," Fiona said, a little desperately. "Can't you just pick them up? Carry them back?" Gemma made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "The handlers tried. One of them ended up with claw marks across his environmental suit. Not through it, thankfully, but the message was clear." "Okay, but," Fiona gestured at the cubs, "they're not being aggressive now. Look at them. Loam's literally napping." "With you, they're docile," Dmitri said. "With everyone else, they're apparently auditioning for a horror film. Ambassador Eric Small is, quote, deeply troubled by this development and is requesting a formal meeting to discuss the situation." A formal meeting? About babysitting? About an unprecedented behavioral anomaly in a species that has never, in recorded history, bonded with a prey species. The word prey hung in the air like a bad smell. Fiona looked at the cubs again. Rick had rolled onto his back, paws in the air, tongue lolling out in what was unmistakably a request for belly rubs. Prey. Right. "When's this meeting?" she asked. 1 hour. Conference room 3. And yes, You'll need to bring them because... Dimitri's professional mask slipped for just a moment, showing pure exhaustion. Because apparently, they won't let anyone near them except you. And the last thing we need is 3 traumatized predator cubs, tearing through the ship looking for their... He trailed off. Their what? We don't know, Gemma said quietly. That's the problem. We don't know what they think you are. The meeting was exactly as awkward as Fiona had imagined, except somehow worse. Conference room 3 was packed with people who all looked varying degrees of uncomfortable. The Felkari delegation took up one side of the long table, including Ambassador Eric Smol, a towering figure of midnight fur and barely contained predatory grace, and Elixigor, a slightly smaller male whose silver stripes seemed to shimmer when he moved. The human contingent occupied the other side. Dimitri, Gemma, a couple of diplomatic officers Fiona didn't recognize, and, joy of joys, someone from intelligence with the kind of face that suggested she thought everyone was a potential security threat. Which, fair, but still. And then there was Fiona, sitting at the end of the table with 3 cubs draped across her like living scarves. Pip had claimed her lap. Rick was pressed against her left side, purring like a small engine. Loam had her head on Fiona's right thigh, golden eyes half closed in contentment. Everyone was staring. Right, Dimitri said, after a silence that stretched just past comfortable. Ambassador Eric Smol, thank you for joining us. I understand this situation is as unexpected for you as it is for us. Eric Smol's ears flicked back. A gesture Fiona had learned meant displeasure. When he spoke, his voice was a deep rumble, translated through the universal comm system with only a slight delay. Unexpected does not capture the magnitude of this anomaly. Felkari cubs imprint on pack leaders. This is biological imperative, survival instinct honed over millennia. They imprint on strength, on dominance, on the scent of apex status. His gaze fixed on Fiona. They do not imprint on prey. I'm sitting right here, Fiona muttered. Pip squeaked in agreement. No offense intended, Eric Smol continued, though his tone suggested he didn't particularly care about offense. But humans register on our instinctive threat assessment as food, Elixigor supplied helpfully. Prey species, low threat, soft. Okay, wow, thanks for that, Fiona said. Gemma cleared her throat. Perhaps we could focus on the current situation rather than humanity's position on the food chain. The current situation, Eric Smol said, leaning forward, is that 3 cubs from high-ranking families have rejected their own kind in favor of a... He paused, searching for words. A maintenance technician. With no combat training, no leadership rank, no offense, but you're really hammering home this whole humans are useless thing, Fiona interrupted. Rick growled, low and warning, and suddenly Eric Smol went very still. The cub was staring at the ambassador, body tense, ears flat, protective. Fascinating, the intelligence officer murmured, making notes on her data pad. Elixigor leaned forward, studying the cubs with intensity. May I approach? Fiona said. Sure. The Felkari liaison moved slowly, gracefully, every gesture deliberate. He got within 2 meters of the table before Rick stood up, placing himself between Elixigor and Fiona, lips pulled back from his teeth. Not quite a snarl, but close. Elixigor stopped, blinked slowly, sat back. Extraordinary. He's guarding her. Cubs guard pack leaders, Eric Smol said, but his voice held uncertainty now. But pack leaders are always Felkari, Elixigor finished. Always predators, never prey. He tilted his head, studying Fiona. What did you do? Nothing. I just I was working. They showed up. I gave them some food because they looked hungry. And now they won't leave me alone. That's it. That's the whole story. You fed them, Eric Small said slowly. You, a prey species, fed predator cubs. They were cubs. They were hungry. Was I supposed to just ignore them? Yes, three people said simultaneously. Fiona threw up her hands, dislodging Pip, who tumbled into her lap with an indignant squeak. Well, excuse me for having basic compassion. You weren't afraid, Alex Gore said, sudden understanding in his voice. When you encountered them, you weren't afraid. I was a little afraid. They have a lot of teeth. But you didn't run, didn't scream, didn't freeze. Alex Gore looked at Eric Small. She treated them as equals, as individuals worthy of interaction. That's insane, Eric Small said. Prey runs. It's instinct. Maybe human instincts are different, Gemma offered. Or maybe, the intelligence officer said, still making notes, she's just weird. Hey! What followed was 2 hours of the most surreal discussion Fiona had ever been part of. Theories ranged from pheromonal anomalies to psychological imprinting to the possibility that Fiona had somehow performed an unknown Felkari bonding ritual by complete accident. Someone suggested brain scans. Someone else suggested isolation testing. The intelligence officer suggested surveillance, which earned her a flat look from Dimitri. Through it all, the cubs stayed pressed against Fiona, occasionally chirping or growling when someone said something they apparently didn't like. She started to recognize patterns. Rick reacted to perceived threats, Loam to sudden movements, Pip to anything that sounded aggressive. They were reading the room, responding to emotional context, protecting her. Finally, Dimitri called a halt. All right, here's what we're going to do. Fiona, you'll continue your normal duties. With 3 apex predators following me around. With 3 juvenile Felkari in your care. Yes. Ambassador, I assume you'll want some of your people nearby to monitor? Eric Small's tail lashed once. I will assign handlers to shadow at a distance. If the cubs show any signs of distress or aggression, they won't, Fiona said, with more confidence than she felt. Right, guys? 3 pairs of golden eyes looked at her with absolute trust, and something in Fiona's chest twisted. These ridiculous, dangerous, apparently very confused predator babies had decided she was their person, and despite every logical objection, she was starting to decide they were hers too. Dismissed, Dimitri said, sounding exhausted. And Fiona? Try not to start any interstellar incidents. Too late, Gemma muttered. The next 3 days were a masterclass in chaos management. Fiona tried to maintain her normal routine. Maintenance checks, repairs, system diagnostics, but everything took 3 times as long when accompanied by a trio of helpers. Rick insisted on inspecting every panel before she opened it, as if checking for threats. Lomi watched her work with intense focus, occasionally reaching out to touch tools with one careful paw. Pip just created entropy, climbing into access shafts, batting at loose wires, and once, memorably, getting his head stuck in a coolant intake. The crew's reactions ranged from terror to fascination. Some people crossed to the other side of the corridor when they saw Fiona coming. Others stopped to stare, taking photos, whispering to each other. One engineer asked if she could pet them. Rick allowed exactly 3 seconds of head scratches before deciding that was enough social interaction and returning to Fiona's side. The cubs were learning too, watching, mimicking. When Fiona used her sonic wrench, Rick tried to pick it up with his mouth, dropped it, then carefully used both paws. When she walked with her hands in her pockets, all 3 cubs developed a strange hopping gait that seemed designed to match her stride. When she took a break in the mess hall, they sat underneath her table in perfect formation, like furry soldiers at attention. "This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen," Lieutenant Dmitri said, sitting across from Fiona during lunch on the third day. "And I once watched a Geltharian molt during a diplomatic dinner." "They're just kids," Fiona said, sneaking a piece of protein to Pip under the table. "Weird, toothy, alien kids, but still kids. Kids that could bite through your arm. Kids that haven't bitten through my arm. There's a difference. Your optimism is either inspiring or deeply concerning. I haven't decided which." Below the table, Rick made a sound like gravel in a blender, which Fiona had learned was his version of laughing, or threatening. The line was thin. That night, Fiona did something probably stupid. She let them into her quarters. She told herself it was practical. They were sleeping in the corridor anyway, and people kept tripping over them. She told herself it was safer. If they were inside, they couldn't wander off and terrorize other crew members. She told herself a lot of things that were probably justifications, but the truth was simpler. She was getting attached. They curled up on the floor next to her bed, a pile of fur and claws and quiet purring. Loam draped one paw over Rick's back. Pip wedged himself between them, tiny and content. Safe. "You guys are going to get me fired," Fiona whispered into the darkness. Rick's tail thumped once against the floor. Agreement, or maybe just sleep-twitching. "I don't know what you think I am. I'm not a pack leader. I'm not a warrior or a hero or anything special. I fix things when they break. That's it." Pip squeaked, soft and drowsy. "Yeah, I know. You don't care." Fiona closed her eyes. "Well, just so you know, I'm keeping you. All three of you. The universe can figure out the paperwork." The purring intensified, a sound like distant thunder, and Fiona fell asleep to the sound of her strange, dangerous, perfect new family breathing in sync. The distress call came at 0300 hours, which was, in Fiona's opinion, an absolutely terrible time for anything to happen. She was dreaming about something involving infinite corridors and missing tools when the ship-wide alert jerked her awake. All three cubs instantly on their feet, ears forward, bodies tense. "Medical transport refuge. This is the endless frontier," the comm system crackled. "We're receiving your distress signal. What's your status?" Static. Then a voice, tight with fear. "Under attack, pirates. They've breached our port side. We have patients on board. Please—" The connection cut out. Fiona was pulling on her uniform before she consciously decided to move. The cubs watched her, reading her tension, feeding off it. When she headed for the door, they followed without hesitation. The corridors were chaos. Crew members rushing to stations, security teams mobilizing, the ship's engines thrumming as they changed course. Fiona made it to engineering before Gemma's voice crackled over her personal comm. "All non-essential personnel to safe zones. That means you, Fiona." "I'm engineering staff. Pretty sure I'm essential." "You're a maintenance technician with 3. A pause. "Just get to a safe zone. That's an order." Fiona looked at the cubs. They looked back, waiting, trusting. "Yeah, about that," she muttered, and kept walking. Engineering was controlled pandemonium. The chief engineer was barking orders, people were routing power to shields, and someone was swearing creatively at a console that was apparently not cooperating. Fiona found an empty station and pulled up the ship's status displays. The Endless Frontier wasn't a warship. She was a diplomatic vessel with defensive capabilities, emphasis on defensive. Against a dedicated pirate crew with military-grade weapons, they were going to have problems. "Shields at 60%, someone called out. Weapons systems charging. Medical transport is 8 minutes out. Fiona pulled up the shield distribution matrix, fingers flying over the controls. She could reroute power from non-essential systems, maybe boost the forward shields by 15%, buy them some time. The ship shuddered. Alarm klaxons wailed. Hull breach, Deck 8, Section 12. Fiona's stomach dropped. That was 2 decks below. Engineering. And Section 12 was... That's the maintenance junction, she said out loud. There's an external airlock access there. I was supposed to replace the seals next week. Lockdown protocols engaging, the chief engineer shouted. All personnel evacuate affected sections. But Fiona was already moving, cubs at her heels, because she knew that junction. She knew every panel, every access shaft, every vulnerability. And if pirates were coming through there, they'd have a direct route to the ship's primary databanks. Fiona! Gemma's voice in her ear. Where are you going? Deck 8. They're going to hit the data storage. Security is en route. Stand down. Fiona switched off her comm. The cubs kept pace with her as she ran, their claws clicking on the deck plating, bodies low and predatory. This was different from their playful following. This was hunting posture. They knew something was wrong. She reached Deck 8 and slowed, listening. Voices ahead, speaking a language the universal translator struggled with, harsh and guttural. The emergency lighting cast everything in red, shadows jumping and stretching. Fiona pressed herself against the wall, cubs beside her, and peered around the corner. 3 figures in armored enviro suits, military weapons, moving with purpose toward the data junction. Pirates. Had to be. And they were between her and the emergency lockdown controls. Her mind raced. She could go back, find security, let them handle it. That was the smart play. The safe play. The lead pirate raised something that looked like a plasma cutter, aimed at the data junction door. Fiona looked at the cubs. They were staring at the pirates with intensity, bodies coiled. Rick's lips had pulled back from his teeth. Loam's tail was rigid. Even Pip had gone absolutely still, golden eyes locked on the intruders. Okay, Fiona whispered. Okay, if we're doing this, here's the plan. She pulled out her data pad, accessed the environmental controls for this section. Lights. She could kill the lights. And the gravity, maybe, for just a few seconds, enough to... The cubs moved. Not toward the pirates, toward her. Rick pressed against her left side, Loam her right, Pip between her feet. Protective formation. Guard positions. They weren't going to attack. They were waiting for her to lead. Oh, no, Fiona breathed. Oh, no, you think I'm going to... The lead pirate turned toward their hiding spot, weapon raising. Fiona's hands moved on the data pad. Lights out. Gravity to 20%. Emergency vents to full blast. The corridor plunged into darkness. Shouts of alarm. The soft sound of bodies floating, disoriented. And then the cubs launched forward, and Fiona discovered that apex predators were even more terrifying in microgravity. Rick hit the lead pirate center mass, claws finding purchase on the enviro suit, sending them spinning. Loam went low, sweeping another pirate's legs, or where their legs would be if gravity was normal. Pip, tiny chaos incarnate, latched onto the third pirate's helmet and just started screaming. A sound that was probably meant to be threatening, but came out more like a demonic squeaky toy. Fiona pushed off the wall, floating toward the environmental controls, fingers dancing over the panel. She could lock this section down, trap the pirates here, vent the atmosphere slowly through the breach they'd created. Something grabbed her ankle. She kicked, hard, connected with something that felt like armor. The grip loosened. She grabbed a handhold, pulled herself to the control panel, slammed her palm against the emergency lockdown. Blast doors slammed shut at both ends of the corridor. The gravity snapped back to normal. Bodies hit the deck with heavy thuds. Fiona landed in a crouch, sonic wrench in hand. When had she grabbed that? And found herself face to face with a pirate who was trying to aim a weapon with a very angry Rick attached to his arm. She didn't think, just moved. Sonic wrench to the side of the helmet, maximum frequency. The pirate's shields flickered, died. The helmet's seal cracked. He dropped the weapon, clutching his head, and Rick let go, backing toward Fiona. The other two pirates were down. One was unconscious. The other was curled in a ball while Loam stood over him, one paw on his chest, growling softly. Pip had apparently claimed a dropped weapon as a trophy and was trying to figure out how to carry it. Fiona stared at the scene. 3 pirates, neutralized. 3 cubs, unharmed. Her hands were shaking. "What?" she said to the universe at large. "Just happened?" Rick chirped, smug and proud. The door at the far end of the corridor began cycling open. Security override. A team burst through, weapons raised, and froze at the scene before them. Fiona raised her hands slowly. "So, funny story." The team leader, a Rigelian with skin like burnished copper, lowered his weapon. "Fiona? What? How did you—" "The cubs helped," she said weakly. "And I know where all the environmental controls are. And I might have committed several safety violations. And also, I think I'm going to pass out now." She didn't pass out, but it was close. The security team secured the pirates. Someone called for medical. And Gemma appeared from somewhere looking like she'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "You," Gemma said, pointing at Fiona, "are the most infuriating, reckless, brilliant idiot on this ship." "Thank you?" That wasn't a compliment. Felt like one. The cubs had arranged themselves around Fiona again, purring, pleased with themselves. Pip was still trying to carry the weapon, which was twice his size. Gemma looked at them, looked at the unconscious pirates, looked back at Fiona. "They fought to protect you." "Yeah, I noticed that." "No, you don't understand. They didn't attack. They defended. They followed your lead. They—" Gemma ran a hand through her hair. "They think you're their pack leader. Actually, genuinely think it. That's insane." "Is it?" Gemma gestured at the corridor. "You just took down 3 armed pirates with a sonic wrench and 3 cubs. You didn't panic. You strategized. You led." Fiona looked down at the cubs. Rick stared back, golden eyes bright with something that looked almost like pride. Loam's tail was swishing contentedly. Pip had given up on the weapon and was now grooming his paws, the picture of innocence. "I'm a maintenance technician," Fiona said quietly. "You're a pack leader," Gemma corrected, "whether you wanted to be or not." From somewhere down the corridor, Fiona could hear Captain Dimitri's voice, demanding status reports. She could hear the hum of the ship's engines, the distant klaxons finally going quiet. Normal operations resuming. Except nothing was normal anymore. And maybe, Fiona thought, looking at her 3 ridiculous, dangerous, perfect cubs, that was okay. "Come on," she said, scratching Rick behind the ears. "Let's go explain this to the captain. Again." The cubs followed, of course. They always did. And somewhere in the chaos, Fiona realized she'd stopped questioning it. Ambassador Eriksmol arrived in Medical Bay while Fiona was getting checked over by a doctor who seemed more interested in the cubs than in her minor bruises. The ambassador moved through the space like a storm front, all coiled power and barely restrained intensity, and every person in the room suddenly found somewhere else to be. Except Fiona, who was stuck on a medical bed with 3 cubs draped across her legs like furry blankets. "They fought," Eric Smole said without preamble. "My people witnessed it on the security feeds. Juvenile Felkari, not yet trained in combat, coordinated an attack with precision that would impress adult hunters." "They were protecting me," Fiona said. "That's all." "That is not all." Eric Smole approached slowly, and for once the cubs didn't react defensively. Rick watched him but remained calm. "Do you understand what you witnessed? What you participated in? A really bad day at work?" The ambassador's ears flicked. "Amusement, maybe." "Pack hunting." "True pack hunting, with a designated leader directing strategy while the pack executes tactics. You did not tell them what to do. You did not need to. They read your intentions, your movements, your focus. They acted as extensions of your will." Fiona thought about that, about the way she'd moved toward the control panel and the cubs had moved toward the pirates, about how she'd known somehow that they would defend her while she worked, about the trust that flowed both ways. "I still don't understand why," she said quietly. "Why me? I'm nobody special." "That," Eric Smole said, "is what I came to explain. May I?" He gestured to a chair near the medical bed. Fiona nodded. The doctor, sensing this was above his pay grade, made himself scarce. Eric Smole sat, a strange sight, this massive predator folding himself into human-sized furniture with surprising grace. "Our species evolved in a hostile environment. Multiple apex predators competing for territory, resources, survival. Felkari cubs developed an unusual trait. They do not imprint on their biological parents. They imprint on the strongest available pack leader, regardless of bloodline." "Natural selection," Fiona said. "Cubs who could identify and follow the best leaders had better survival rates." "Precisely. But here is what my people forgot over generations of civilization. The cubs are not looking for the strongest fighter. They are looking for the strongest leader. Strategy, problem-solving, resource management, calm under pressure." His golden eyes fixed on her. "You displayed every trait of pack leadership when you encountered them. You assessed the situation. You provided resources. You showed no fear, no aggression, only competence. To them, you registered as the most qualified leader present. But I'm human. Prey. Adult Felkari see humans as prey because we are trained by culture to see you that way. Cubs have no such training. They see only behavior. And your behavior—" He paused, something almost like respect in his voice. "Your behavior is that of an apex predator who hunts with intelligence rather than claws." Pip chose that moment to wake up, yawn enormously, and try to bite Fiona's data pad. She gently redirected him to a stress ball the doctor had left behind. He pounced on it with murderous intent. "They're still just kids," Fiona said. "They are, but they are also the future of my species, and they have chosen you as their teacher." Eric Smole leaned forward. "The question is, will you accept?" "Accept what?" "Adoption into a Felkari clan. It has never been done with an alien species, but the precedent exists in our ancient laws. A pack leader who earns the loyalty of cubs may claim clan rights." He paused. "You would be the first human ever granted this honor. Your cubs would be recognized as your pack. You would have legal authority over their upbringing." Fiona looked at the 3 balls of fur and chaos currently occupying her medical bed. Rick had fallen asleep sitting up, leaning against her side. Loam was watching her with those intelligent golden eyes, waiting. Pip had murdered the stress ball, and was now napping on its corpse. "I have a job," Fiona said. "I'm a maintenance technician. I can't exactly raise 3 alien kids and fix junction panels at the same time." "Why not?" Eric Small asked simply. "They are already following you everywhere. You are already teaching them. I have seen the reports. They are learning tool use, spatial reasoning, problem solving. One of them attempted to repair a panel yesterday." "That was Loam. She was actually pretty good at it until Pip knocked over my toolkit." "You see? You are already raising them. The only question is whether you do so with the blessing of my people, or whether you continue in this strange limbo state that is causing my diplomatic staff significant stress." Fiona laughed despite herself. "Your diplomatic staff is stressed? You have no idea. There are 11 different reports attempting to classify this situation, 3 different cultural committees arguing about precedent, and yesterday, someone suggested we might need to renegotiate our entire treaty with humanity because of 3 cubs and 1 very stubborn technician. That's ridiculous. Yes, which is why I am offering a simpler solution. Join the clan, raise your pack, show the galaxy that strength comes in many forms." His tail swished once. "And stop giving my people collective heart attacks every time you do something unexpected. I'm not trying to cause problems. I know. You are simply being yourself, which, apparently, is revolutionary." Eric Small stood, preparing to leave. "Think about it, but do not think too long. The cubs are growing quickly, and the imprinting window does not last forever. What they learn from you now will shape who they become." He left, and Fiona was alone with the cubs and her thoughts. Well, mostly alone. The doctor was probably watching from somewhere, making sure she didn't have a concussion. "What do you 3 think?" she asked the cubs. "Should I officially become your weird alien mom?" Rick's ear twitched in his sleep. Loma blinked slowly, which Fiona had learned was the Felkari equivalent of a smile. Pip farted and kept sleeping. "That's a yes, then." 3 months later, Fiona was replacing a faulty relay in junction panel 23B when Rick attempted to hand her a sonic wrench. He'd been watching her work for 20 minutes, studying which tool she used when, and apparently decided he could anticipate her needs. He was right. She needed that exact wrench. "Thanks," she said, taking it. "Good job." Rick's purr could probably be heard 3 decks away. Lome was across the corridor, carefully sorting spare parts by size and function. She'd developed a system that was honestly better than Fiona's original organization method. Pip was supposed to be helping, but had gotten distracted by a fascinating dust particle and was attempting to murder it. Normal day. Weird, impossible, perfect, normal day. The adoption ceremony had been 3 weeks ago, a formal affair with more witnesses than Fiona thought strictly necessary, but apparently making history required an audience. She'd stood before the Felkari High Council, 3 cubs at her side, and spoken the ritual words that Eric Small had taught her. Words about pack, about loyalty, about the bond between leader and led. The cubs had responded with their own vocalizations, a complex series of chirps and growls that meant, roughly translated, "This one is ours, and we are hers, and anyone who disagrees can fight about it." Very diplomatic, her children. Captain Dmitri had attended, looking somewhere between proud and exhausted. Gemma had actually teared up, which she denied later. Half the ship's crew had crowded into the observation gallery, and the other half had watched via live feed. Fiona had become the first human pack leader of Felkari cubs, and somehow her life had gotten both more complicated and simpler at the same time. Fiona? A voice from down the corridor. Lieutenant Dmitri, carrying a datapad. Got a requisition here for 3 sets of modified engineering tools, sized for, quote, juvenile Felkari paws, extra grip, reinforced for enthusiastic use? Yeah, that's mine. They keep trying to use my tools and they're too big, or too small, or they get dropped, a lot. Command approved it. They also approved a request from the Andromeda Science Institute. They want to study your teaching methods. Apparently, 3 other species with pack-bonding young are very interested in cross-species adoption protocols now. I'm not a protocol. I'm just winging it. You're making history. There's a difference? He handed her the datapad. Also, Gemma wanted me to tell you that you're being considered for a commendation for the pirate incident. I broke about 15 safety regulations. You also saved the ship's data core and proved that humans can kick ass when properly motivated. Command is choosing to focus on the second part. Fiona signed the requisition form, watched Pip finally catch the dust particle, and immediately lose interest. You know what the weirdest part is? This feels normal now. 3 predator kids following me around, learning engineering, occasionally threatening diplomats who are rude to me. Just another day. Normal is relative. Your normal is everyone else's science fiction. Dmitri paused. For what it's worth, you're doing great. They're good kids. They really are, Fiona said softly. Terrifying, occasionally destructive, always hungry, but good kids. That night, back in her quarters, now officially expanded to accommodate 3 growing Felkari, Fiona lay in bed listening to the symphony of purring from the floor. Reek and Loam had claimed opposite corners, establishing territory. Pip, as usual, had wedged himself into the space between her bed and the wall, because personal space was for other people. Her datapad chimed. A message from Eric Smole. The High Council wishes to formally thank you for your service to our people. The Cubs' progress reports are exceptional. You are teaching them to be both Felkari and something new, something better. The galaxy is watching, Fiona. Show them what humanity can do. No pressure, then. She set the datapad aside, closed her eyes, and listened to her strange, impossible family breathe in the darkness. Somewhere out there, other ships were traveling between stars. Other crews were dealing with their own crises. Other people were living their own stories. But here, in this moment, Fiona had everything she needed. 3 cubs who thought she hung the stars. A job she was good at. A purpose she'd never expected. Hey, she whispered into the dark. Thanks for following me home, guys. Best mistake I ever made. Pip squeaked in his sleep. Rick's tail thumped once against the floor. Loam's purr shifted to a deeper frequency, the sound of absolute contentment. And Fiona smiled, because the universe had given her the strangest gift imaginable, and she was keeping it. All of it. Forever.